Christine Sevier with Creating New Hope, the Senior Living Advocacy and Advisor Group. I feel like everyone in this group has probably seen this presentation at a senior center somewhere, or event or a Kiwanis club. So we do this all over the Bay Area. So a little bit about my story and how I got into this. I'm trying to just move my pictures and camera around here. So I have a background in providing case management services. I was a mental health counselor at John Muir Behavioral Health. And then my mom passed away in 2014, and I had to step up and help take care of my grandparents. And that was, I thought, I work in a psychiatric unit. Of course I can take care of my grandmother who has Alzheimer's. Are you kidding me? This is going to be cake work. Until I had to do it full time, I was in way over my head, especially when she became less mobile. And I literally could not figure out how to use the pull sheet and how to change her while she was bedridden. I was having a hard time getting caregivers to show up on the weekends or a holiday or evening. So that just became challenging. And I eventually had to find a community for her. Now, initially, I had called, the local agencies and A Place for Mom. That's, one of the go-tos, one of the big national brands. I call it Place for Mom. I get this list and I go out when I take my list and I went and checked these places out, scheduled my tours. And some of them were like, I don't know. Let me just Google this address and see how I really feel about it. And one of the residential care homes, like they were in like pending foreclosure status. And I was like, ooh. And I used to own and operate a large licensed childcare program. So I knew that the real data lived in the transparency records with the Department of Social Services. So I just went on my own and I went and scoured the Department of Social Services records. And I eventually found a care home 3 blocks from my house. The lady hadn't advertised. She wasn't on Yelp. She'd been in the business since like 1992 and hadn't had any type of infraction on her license record since like 1993. And the infraction was expired ketchup. So I said, let me go knock on the expired ketchup lady's door and see how this is going, because my grandmother is bedridden. She's going to be needing high care, repositioned. I'm worried about bed sores, and I really need whoever is going to take care of her to be on top of their game with taking care of her ADLs. Went and knocked on this lady's door. So, know me, hi, I see you have a care home here. And of course, she was full. A lot of places that have been in business for a long time and they provide quality care, they have a waiting list. So I said, look, I will wait until you have availability for my grandmother, just because the interview process with her was spot on. And my concern for her was, how do you keep your caregivers accountable, right? Because at the end of the day, the buck stops with you, but I know that we have these caregivers in here. And she says, oh, I live around the corner from this care home. So I'm here every morning and I check ADLs myself. And I was like, oh, I love you. I'm willing to wait. So I waited. And by this time I had Hope Hospice involved, and they said, Christine, your grandmother has maybe 6 months, just the decline of the Alzheimer's disease. This is where you're at. So I was like, okay, let me just make sure she's somewhere that she'll get the 24-hour care she needs. That's skilled professionals, that this is their business. They know what they're doing. Me, I was in over my head. She lived there 2.5 years. Her sheets were changed. Her nails were painted. Her hair was washed. They took such great care of her. I popped in unannounced all the time, and she was always changed, always fed, and I just had a wonderful experience. So friends and family, I went back to work, and friends and family are saying, hey, can you help me find one of those boarding homes that you found for your grandmother? So I started helping people on a part-time basis, and really didn't think that I could create a whole business doing this. And eventually just more people started asking for my help. So I was like, okay, I'll just quit my job and do this full time. So that's my background story on how Creating New Hope came about. And here's our agenda. What we'll go over in this PowerPoint are my recommendations, understanding the type of care communities, vetting recommendations, checking a facility's licensing, and the residents' rights, and what the difference between a DRA and a HCO are in California. So anytime you know your loved one maybe has some mobility issues, or they may need care in the future, start the process early. Don't wait for the emergency situation to happen. Just kind of get an idea of what's out there, what's in your price range, what's close to your home. It's just kind of start looking. I always tell families to involve the prospective resident as much as possible. Schedule lunch tours, have them come out and taste the food, check out the activity schedule, use a checklist and go over, you know, do they provide everything that you need? If you know your loved one has a spinal condition and they may need at one point a Hoyer lift, let's have those conversations early and say, hey, they have this degenerative spinal thing, they may need a Hoyer lift. What is your policies around a Hoyer lift? Do you not take them? Or do you use two-person transfers? What does that look like? Don't be oversold on the attractiveness of the facility. I know a lot of families, you know, you go into these places and you're like, oh wow, this is the Ritz-Carlton of senior living. You really need to match residents with their care needs and the communities. You know, don't be oversold on just the bells and whistles and how beautiful a community can be. Narrow down the options. I said about 2 or 3, and then visit them several times. Drop by unannounced on the weekends and take a look at their activity schedule. If the activity schedule says, you know, we're having karaoke at 11:30 on Thursday, pop in and see if that's really going on at 11:30 on Thursday. And I always tell families, try the food. Last place you want to be is where you do not like the chef and the food's horrible. So try the food. So there are 4 types of care settings in California. They're all licensed under RCFE, which is called Residential Care Facility for the Elderly, except the skilled nursing one. But so there's independent and assisted, and those are like your apartment style settings where you'll have an apartment, maybe 600, maybe 1,000 square feet, and you have caregivers that will help you with your ADLs based on your care plan. You'll have an emergency call pendant button. You'll have a lot of opportunities for engagement and activities. I like to tell families that independent and assisted living really feels like a social model. So if your loved one can still communicate, can still get about, can advocate for themselves, going into a larger community can just revive people, bring them back to life, and get them back to engaging with folks. Your residential care settings are for those high chronic acute needs. There's going to be a smaller client to caregiver ratio. You're looking at 2 to 6, and there'll not a lot going on. So if your loved one has to go into, you know, a higher acute setting and needs more physical hands-on care, a residential care home is great because of the ratios, but they may be bored out of their mind. So you always have to consider that. And then there's memory care communities where they are locked communities. Now, I don't mean like locked, but there's a delayed egress on the door. So if you have wanderers, so someone's always watching them, they're always monitored. And if you have a loved one who has some memory issues and maybe they are at risk for eloping and getting out, but they need some space to walk around and pace in a safe setting, memory care is great. And then here goes your skilled nursing. And skilled nursing is usually the independent, assisted, and residential care and memory care. There are a few conditions that they do not take because it is a skilled need, and that's an ostomy bag, a tracheotomy, and like insulin injections. Anytime you have a skilled need that requires a licensed nurse, you're going to see yourself in a skilled nursing facility. Or if you need rehab, all of the insurance companies will pay for some sort of rehab. And like with Medicare, you know, you have to, I think it's like 120 days. I don't know. It changes all the time. But those are your typical 4 settings, types of care. So on the independent side, as far as price, you're in the Bay Area, you're looking at $4,000 plus a month plus care. So depending on how much care you need, that can be maybe start off at an additional $600 for med management, or it can go up to $3,000 if you need help with everything, reminders, ADLs. So if you're in on the assisted and independent living communities and you need a lot more care, it can get quite expensive. But they do have a ton of amenities, opportunities for engagement. You know, prior to COVID, they were taking buses to, you know, the Berkeley's Farmers Market and going to the Opera House. And I mean, it's a great place to be if, you know, you have the physical ability to kind of be out and about and engage with folks and don't need a lot of care and oversight. It's a great option. Here's what a residential care home looks like. And in the residential care settings, it's home setting. The meals are all included, everything's included. It's just a lot quieter. You're going to see folks that maybe they're on hospice here. They need a lot more care, a lot more wheelchairs. You know, maybe a community will have like live music or something on a Friday, but they're not going to have a huge, robust activities program. But if your loved one is bedridden and needs, you know, 24-hour care, this is a great option. And their price ranges, I would say, in the Bay Area, $4,500 to maybe $7,500, just depending on the location and the care needs. And then here's skilled nursing. You know, skilled nursing is that high acute care. Medicare only pays for so many days. And I would say in the Bay Area, you can pay up to $7,000 to $14,000 a month out of pocket if you had to stay in a community longer than what the insurance was willing to pay. So I always tell folks, work with your case managers, the discharge planners at the facility, at the skilled nursing facility, and figure out what a true baseline could be. Because as soon as they say, oh, you're mobile, you're using the restroom on your own, you no longer have IV bag, you know, you're able to bear 10% weight on your leg, you know, they're quick to get you out. And especially now with COVID, these communities have been hit the hardest because you're seeing, you know, people coming from the hospital in there. And I mean, it's a rehabilitation place. You're going to have people that are sicker there. So they kind of want healthier people to just get in and get out. I experienced the same thing with my great grandmother this year when she broke her femur during COVID. And yeah, we got her out of there as quickly as we could, but she's still, prior to COVID, if she definitely could have benefited from a lot more rehab time, but there wasn't a lot going on. So, and it just, you know, it depends on which county, because a lot of times they weren't providing too many sessions, and it's just crazy times right now. So I always tell families, when you're narrowing down your search, you always want to go and check out their performance through the Department of Social Services. And here is the website that you can do that with. It's cdss.ca.gov, and you're going to check community care licensing. And here's just the how-to. You're going to go to this little icon, find licensed care, search for a facility, and then you're going to click on elderly assisted living. And here's what it'll look like. So you can see here to the right-hand side, this community, I think I searched the city Hayward. So all of the places in Hayward that are licensed popped up, and boom, look at the second one on this list is on probation. Now, if you were to look at their records, which you can right here, you will see this facility is licensed for 38 residents. They're on probation. They've had their license since 2008. And they have a ton of visits, complaint investigation reports. Like you can see right here in 2016, 1, 2, 3, like something is going on there. I don't know if the administrator is strong or what's going on, but these are the communities I watch out for. And you always want to check this, especially if your loved one can no longer advocate for themselves and they're immobile. These are the things that you want to look at. Because what you'll find is different citation types. So a type A citation imposes an immediate health and safety risk. Usually your type B citations will be lack of record keeping or safety and personal rights, but you really have to read the report. So you can click on each report. So for example, You can see there's good care homes out there that maybe they have a few type A citations. You read this type A citation and you'll read through it and it's like, oh, resident had Clorox wipes in their kitchen counter and they weren't allowed to, which is true. If it's a dementia facility, you don't want, you know, folks having access to Clorox wipes or hand sanitizer, but sometimes family members will bring things into their loved one and not follow the proper procedure and say, oh, I'm going to clean my mom's toilet. I'm just going to leave this Ajax underneath the bathroom counter in their little apartment. No, bad. Don't do that. But you can see what the difference between maybe someone who has developed pressure sores and it's a type A citation because they were, you know, sitting in their soiled diaper for too long, or it was a simple mistake. So read the reports, the complaints, the violations, and check to see how long they've been in operations. What we're seeing now is a lot of places are being bought and sold. So unless you're working with someone that's been in this industry for a while, you won't know if this is just a new license number that has a clean record, or do they have the same staff? Do they have the same administrator? Is it the same people that's been there for the last 12 years? They just have a new management company. So you want to look out for those things. And then here's just some statistics on Alzheimer's that I always like to tell families about. And so here are the personal rights for residential care facilities. And these are the same rights for the larger assisted living communities, independent living communities. If they have an RCFE license, they have to abide by these personal rights. So basically you can take your loved one out anytime you want. They can have visitors. You can have what's called a family council. Let's say you're in the community and maybe you don't like that community has the Catholic priest come on Sunday and not the Christian or whatever. You can form a community council within your within that community and say, hey, let me get all the other family members together. This is what I'd like to see happen, and then submit a proposal to the owner, and they would have to adhere to that. And there, what else is on here? So even during COVID, you still have these rights in place. There is nothing. However, with COVID, if you were to take your loved one out, and depending on what the county guidelines are for that particular county, whether it be Alameda County, Contra Costa County, let's say you have to take your loved one out because, look, we're month 7 and everyone's still on lockdown. And you're like, look, I'm taking my mom out to breakfast. It's my grandson's birthday. I'm not doing this. She's coming out. Well, you can absolutely do that. However, when you come back, you may have to have her go into a 14-day quarantine and have her tested. So just really depends on what's going on in that particular county, and follow those restrictions, because we also want to keep the other residents in those communities safe. So while you still have these rights, we're still thinking about COVID and mitigating spread. So here is what I like to talk to families about all the time. What's the difference between a DRA, domestic referral agency, versus a licensed home care agency? In California, you're allowed to have a domestic referral agency and like hire a caregiver on your own. However, if they are unlicensed, I tell families to pay special attention to what you are opening yourself up to. Are they background checked? Do they have a live scan clearance? Are they adequately trained? Do they have CPR? And then California labor laws, especially with AB 20, no, AB 9, I forget the assembly bill, but it's the one that Uber and Lyft are fighting over about independent contractors. If you hire a caregiver in your house from the neighborhood, you are going to be the employer of record. You should be carrying workers' comp. You should be carrying liability insurance. You should be paying them a fair wage, and adhering to sick time policy, overtime policies with the labor board. Because I've seen this happen so many times. Families say, oh, I hired the church lady from down the street and she's much cheaper. She's only $20 an hour. Well, then the church lady gets hurt in the house picking up grandpa. And now you're in a lawsuit. Now there's a lien against the house for unpaid wages, because come to find out now, after she got hurt in the house, now the lawyer's saying, oh, you were working there for 24 hours and you're only getting paid $100 a day. Wait a second. You are owed all of these unpaid wages. So I always tell families, go with a licensed home care agency like JM, Home Care Assistance, where their background checks screen, they're, have all of their labor law provisions, workers' comp, and all that. That's not something you guys want to get concerned with, because I've seen so many families get into situations where they didn't turn out well with that private duty caregiver, and now there's a lawsuit. And pretty much that is it as far as my slides go in my presentations, but I definitely want to open it up to any questions about what's happening with COVID in communities. I will say right now, in my experience, if a larger community is really on top of communicating with families and allowing families to conduct those backyard visits, and as long as it's safe, families are fine staying put. If there's higher needs, they're moving to smaller residential care homes during this time. And it's so difficult for a lot of facilities right now.
So Christine, I had a question. So
Sure.
What is your area that you cover, that you do these things for people?
Alameda, Contra Costa, Solano.
Okay. And Santa Clara, or?
Santa Clara, I do have some contacts in Santa Clara. I have had a lot more people reach out to me for that area. Just kind of about what I do is I go and look at the transparency records, and then I pop into the small residential care facilities unannounced to see what's going on and if I like it and how the owner is. And usually when you pop in unannounced, you can see how the community is really operating, especially in the smaller 6-bed residential care setting.
And so and this is more of, so can a family hire you to take and do all this work for them?
Oh, so I didn't even say that. So I don't charge families anything. I don't charge case management or anything. I get paid from the communities a referral fee when I provide placement services. Okay. So it's a complimentary service.
There's a question in the chat from JM Drew. Should something go wrong, are we bonded and insured for both health caregiver and client?
We are bonded and insured if something should go wrong. But my previous question is, you were talking about like the 6-bed care homes. Mm-hmm. Do they have any personal care, skilled care at all? How does that work, included in that monthly fee?
So skilled care, unless the owner is a licensed registered nurse, which there are very few, or that person goes on hospice, those communities are no longer suitable. I mean, in some instances, if the owner, there are a few owners that are registered nurses that own these communities, they're able to either bring in home health or apply for a waiver for the state to say, hey, such and such has been with me for 3 years. She's declining. The family doesn't want her to leave. Can we use metformin instead of insulin injections? Can we bring in hospice? Can the hospice nurse manage the catheter and then with my assistance? So it just really varies on situation to situation, and that owner has to apply for a waiver. And it doesn't happen often.
If someone is declining and needs to leave their residence, whether that be a senior community or a private residence, can they go into a care home on hospice? Meaning, yes. Can they go to a care home to have their hospice stay?
Yes. You absolutely can do that.
good, because that's really good to hear, because I'm seeing a few recently where there's just not appropriate, there's not enough support for the individual in their home. They really need to be
Yeah.
somewhere where there's a little more just overall support,
Yeah.
even on hospice.
Yeah. Yeah. It is that. So yeah, that happens all the time. Sometimes, especially when things are good in the industry and there, aren't many beds available at some of the good places. Sometimes they won't want to take a hospice because then that's taking up a bed.
Yeah, short stay.
Yeah, a short stay, a little respite bed, but they're still out there.
And so if we have that situation, do you help with those type of short ones?
Yeah.
Do you still, is that,
Absolutely.
okay. I wasn't sure if a client needed to stay a certain length at a facility for you to get your referral fee.
Yes. So sometimes it just depends on, with my business practices, I'm super generous, especially now. So if you can't pay me for 90 days, or maybe I only take 20% or one flat fee just to have that, like, resident have a good experience, like, I'm willing to negotiate with the owner. Like, the families are always first in this situation. But yes, there are some placement agencies that are like, nope, 65% no matter what. That's just not how I operate my business, because I've been there. I've been there.
I heard of a new thing this week that I'd never heard of before, and it has made someone discharging from the hospital, they cannot find a sniff because she has CRE. I'd never heard of that one.
CRE, I've never heard.
It's a antibiotic resistant infection.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I know that C. diff and MRSA, and I'm sure we're going to start seeing new stuff.
Yeah, no, I know C. diff, that's a tough one,
Yeah.
but CRE was a new one for me.
Yeah.
Commercial real estate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Christine, I have a question.
Sure.
I have a friend whose cousin was passing away in the last couple of weeks, and it was obvious that she wasn't going to make it more than 2 weeks. And the hospitals would not let her go home for hospice. What are the situations that we should be aware of that people are not going to be allowed to go home for hospice? She did not have COVID.
Unless she was connected to a ventilator or some type of device, I don't understand. You could leave against medical advice at any moment. You can just say, thanks, doc, no, I'm leaving. And in those situations, if the family does want to bring her home, did want to bring her home, I would call the ombudsman. And sometimes I would get the DON involved.
What's DON?
The director of nursing, whoever the director of nursing for that particular unit, and say, hey, this is, we want hospice services at home. And, we can put you in touch with a lot of great hospice agencies out here in the Bay Area that, they're ready to rock and roll in a minute.
So if they're on a ventilator, they're not allowed to go home for hospice. And do you have a ventilator at home?
Well, so where it gets tricky is who's going to pay for that ventilator.
Okay, thank you.
And are there other skills that the family or someone needs to be able to do 24/7 to make sure they're safe, the client is safe? Like there may be suction, and that's, there's just many moving parts.
Yeah.
That's good to know, because I'm a medical layperson. I'm way at the back end with family in the medical profession, but I've never had hospice connections, even though my mom was a home health nurse. So that's why I was asking, because I think a lot of people would have confusion about when is it okay to come home or not.
Yeah, I think it's also too a very personal decision. But yeah, so that's it, ladies. That's all I have for you.